Hello friends, it's me, and today, food mascot crime. Let's check out Food Theory, the worst crimes of food mascots exposed from the food theorist. Together, let's go. Let's start.
We're no strangers to food mascots on this channel. We've exposed them time and time again, but they're still out and about laughing at us from their foodie pedestals. So today, we're gonna lock them behind bars and see just how long they'll stay there. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Food Theory.
Hello Internet, welcome to Food Theory.
Today, we're crunching down on crime. You ever notice how frequently mascots are criminals? Like, obviously, they're your hamburglers and cookie crooks, but we at Food Theorists have also caught a fair share of unassuming and charming mascots breaking the law. The M&M spokes candy? Those guys are so funny, but they're also cannibals. Finn the goldfish? Yes, he has a name, and he's a fish trafficking traitor to his own kind. Captain Crunch looks like a kindly grandpappy, but he's a potential murderer who for 60 years falsely claimed the valor and title of a US naval officer, despite being called out as a fraud by actual Navy officials. Since then, he's clearly been absolved of all those crimes and is now officially a captain. Now, I don't know about you, but this seems awfully generous. It seems like these mascots all have deep pockets and connections that allow them to get away with their crimes. But I want to know what would happen if the lot of them actually faced prosecution charges. Is Chester Cheetah dangerously cheesy or just flat out dangerous to have walking amongst polite society? How many burgers has the Hamburglar burgled? And if the Kool-Aid Man had to pay for damages, would his bosses at Kraft Heinz be able to afford the bill? Today, we're
Oh no!
throwing not just the kitchen sink at these food mascots, but the book. According to the law, which mascot is the worst criminal offender and who will be doing the hardest time behind bars? Grab a spoon and a broom because we're about to clean up the grocery aisle. So let me just start by saying there are a lot of food mascots, and many of them are looking at careers that span over 50 years. This means I've got a crunch ton of commercials to dig up and binge, but it also means we have to set up some ground rules so that the Food Theory courthouse doesn't get bogged down with prosecuting the small fries. The first
To be exact, right, it's so long that think about it. You could be your grandparents when they are children, they were eating the same food as you are. Your grandparents.
rule I'm employing is double jeopardy. Matt already extensively exposed the crimes of the M&Ms, Captain Crunch, Finn, and the Noid in his own theories. So in the interest of treading new ground, these mascots are protected by the double jeopardy clause, aka the law that prevents someone from being repeatedly tried for the same crime. But for the curious, these criminals would be looking at roughly 25 to life, 1 year, 5 years, and 10 plus years depending on how much the fashion police throws his way. I mean, what even is that? I'm also going to only focus on the crimes of individual mascots. So while Cinnamon Toast Crunch Crazy Squares do frequently eat their own kind in a violent sugar-fueled craze, we can't very well put an entire species of cereal on trial. There's also some important legal parameters we should cover before we take these mascots to court. The American legal system is very nebulous. Crimes in some states are punished differently and even defined differently in others. So in order to streamline our sentencing, I'll be using the national averages for each crime. So with all those boring rules out of the way, it's time that we play judge, jury, and check-secutioner. Hear ye, food court is now in session. Now,
I've just got a quick question. Who came up with this idea? Food mascot? Seriously?
I don't gotta tell you, there's a lot of mascots. Like, a lot. Like, I didn't even realize how many there were when I first started researching this super cute idea, and then suddenly I'm knee-deep in Quizno's Spung Monkeys and Krinkle's the Nightmare Clown. To keep things simple, let's break things down into the major categories so we can find the worst offender in each. You've got your fast food mascots, your breakfast cereal mascots, general foods, your beverages, and finally, snacks. I thought the fast food mascots would be where we'd find the worst offenders, but honestly, Ronald, super clean. Wendy, nothing. The Colonel is just a sweet old man that loves his chicken. The title isn't even stolen valor, it's an official title given to him. He just really leaned into it. Even Jack from Jack in the Box isn't much of a criminal. And I thought the same thing as you. Are you kidding? With that creepy face? But turns out, after being blown up in 1980, Jack returned to advertisements in the mid-90s seeking revenge like a fast food Deadpool. His return escalates in the destruction of the Jack in the Box boardroom, implying that he had evened the score with the old brass that blew him up. Fortunately for Jack, there's reasonable doubt that he actually murdered anyone, despite the heavy implications. Also, because he's technically the CEO, he probably won't be charged for damaging company property. I will say that Jack does have some light breaking and entering here and there, and has committed battery on Phil, his stand-in that tried to take over while he was in a coma. So overall, Jack may be a wee bit psychotic, but isn't racking up any notable prison time. The Burger King is where we start getting into the fun stuff. See, he's creepy enough that it should be illegal, even though it's not. And his diplomatic immunity may cover a lot of things he gets himself into, but unfortunately for him, corporate espionage is absolutely not one of those. In this commercial, he plain as day, or Knight in this case, steals the formula from McDonald's Sausage Egg McMuffin so that he could sell his own version. He was dumb enough to not just get caught, but wear a mask of his own face. So he'd be going down for 15 years and a couple of million in fines. But this category also gives us the criminal mascot of criminal mascots, the Hamburglar. There are actually some subtle distinctions we need to keep in mind when it comes to the criminal stylings of the Hamburglar. While theft, robbery, and burglary are all used interchangeably in conversation, legally they're all incredibly distinct crimes that can make a big difference towards how long the robber is staying in the slammer for. Theft, also known as larceny, is the least severe and occurs when someone takes another person's property non-violently, usually without involving direct contact with their target. Robbery, on the other hand, is the most severe and involves acts of stealing through use of force or fear. If there's a weapon involved, it's a robbery. Most mascots don't fall into this category for, well, obvious reasons. It'd be a little hard to sell chalupas if the Taco Bell dog threatened to kill your entire family. Then there's burglary, which is the act of breaking and entering with the intent of committing another crime, be it theft or violence. As far as mascot mischief goes, we're primarily concerned with the degrees of theft. Remember, the punishment has to fit the crime, and not all theft is equal. Nabbing some value menu burgers isn't the same as stealing priceless art, but this doesn't get him off the hook. See, the Hamburglar's crimes actually fall into the category of larceny. Larceny has two major categories: petty larceny and grand larceny. If the total value of goods stolen falls below the threshold of a couple $100s, a theft is considered a misdemeanor, a minor criminal offense, and is likely only going to result in a few months to a year in a county jail. However, if the value of total goods surpasses a certain threshold, then a crime enters the realm of grand larceny, a felony offense in a majority of states. Felonies are the most serious criminal offense and mean hard time in prison. Most mascot thieves, like the Hamburglar, fall into the petty larceny category. In fact, these meals are so cheap, they'd likely be downgraded from petty misdemeanors to petty infractions, which carry no jail time and only a fine. Does this mean that the Hamburglar is solely facing fines for his kleptomania? Not exactly. Stealing a single cheeseburger might only result in a fine, but the law accounts for repeat offenses, for which the Hamburglar has many. In my research spanning from his first appearance in the 70s to his modern update, I found evidence of at least 21 on-camera attempts at stealing burgers. That's
Oh, come on, that's too many.
Florida crime wave is going to result in a much harsher sentencing. So if Mayor McCheese pushed the district attorney of McDonaldland to bring the hammer down on the Hamburglar, he's looking at upwards of 3 extra years in prison per instance of theft. And if you think that's bad, it only gets worse. While most of these crimes were committed in public spaces, at least one of them was a burglary of a residential home, and another was a straight up robbery. The burglary committed in this commercial would normally be classified as a first-degree burglary. In other words, breaking and entering with the intention of petty theft. But considering that a little girl was home during the actual burglary, the law considers this a crime of a higher degree. He's looking at a severe and violent felony burglary charge, punishable with a 6-year slammer sentence. All totaled up, the Hamburglar is facing an average of 32 and a half years in prison for his crimes. Those are some rookie numbers once we get to the breakfast mascots though, because while Tony may be great, his friend the Trix Rabbit is absolutely not. This can come as a surprise since you might know the Trix Rabbit not as a perpetrator, but as a victim. Oftentimes, commercials show the rabbit purchasing or winning tricks only for it to be snatched from his hands by gatekeeping children. Don't let the sob story fool you. He's got a rap sheet longer than Toucan Sam's beak. You see,
Ooh.
Mr. Rabbit has been gracing the front of cereal boxes and TV commercials since 1959, giving him a decade of commercials on top of the Hamburglar. And while Hamburglar has to share the spotlight with Ronald, Grimace, and the rest of McDonaldland, Rabbit is the sole mascot of Trix, which naturally lends itself to more screen time and more crime. My Trix binging turned up 62 on-camera instances of the rabbit trying to thieve tricks from children.
Wait, what?
MO mostly involves using a variety of disguises to trick middle schoolers into sharing their cereal with him. You might think that with all these costume changes, he would be guilty of identity fraud. But legally, identity fraud requires that a perpetrator impersonate someone real. Rabbit's deceptions are less specific. Instead, his real crime here is theft by false pretenses. This carries the same penalties as regular theft, so he's facing roughly 62 years out of the gate. That said, there is one disguise that'll get him into hot water: the police officer. Impersonating law enforcement will tack on an additional year in jail to his sentence. Tricks are for kids, and apparently, maximum security penitentiaries are for rabbits. The real scum of the earth, though, reside in the general foods category, mainly because most of them appear squeaky clean. Too clean. I mean, look at the hamburger helper. Look at his dumb face. You just know he's done something sinister. We just haven't been able to find any prints. Might need a hand. No, but seriously, the Jolly Green Giant's going to prison. You know it.
Oh, come on!
But I know it. Everyone and their mother knows it. This dude is definitely getting hit with an indecent exposure charge. Thanks to the IRL statue of the giant in Blue Earth, Minnesota, we know that he doesn't wear underwear. And the fact that he didn't cover up his pea pod in front of an underage sprout means that he'll be doing at least 5 years in prison and get placed in the registry. Jolly's biggest, most outlandish crime, however, has global ramifications for every citizen of Earth. Due to his incredible powers, Jolly has the ability to move the sun and moon. The physics of how a 55-foot tall green dude can push the sun out of the sky and crush the moon with his bare hands aside, I don't think I need to tell you that casually moving celestial bodies out of orbit would seriously mess things up worldwide. We're talking—
Okay, so quick question, okay? How do you imprison some individual that have the power of a god? How do you sentence jail time to a god? How? Like, seriously, how?
Tidal waves, crop failure, seasonal disruption, and the destabilization of the Earth's axis. And he doesn't stop there. After shuffling around the sun and moon, he reaches into space and breaks off a chunk of the moon to make cheese. And to be clear, this is our moon he's destroying. The Jolly Green Giant doesn't live in another multiverse. The Valley of the Green Giant is actually in Minnesota. So if you tally everything up, the utter destruction of everything we know and love, carry the one, Jolly Green Giant would face approximately $4,850,000,000 in 5 years in the slammer for his crimes.
I don't think so. I think the number is not enough. But also, too much. You know, it's a god, so technically speaking, the number is anywhere in between 0 to infinite.
4.8 billion years for involuntary manslaughter, 50 million years for harming protected animals, and 5 for indecent exposure. That jolly monster. All right, I had my fun. Let's move on to probably the most famous criminal mascot, the beverage man himself, the Kool-Aid Man. This
Oh yeah!
iconic party crasher sprouted arms in 1975 and has been knocking down walls ever since.
1975 is 89012. Nearly 50 years ago. Wow.
Surprisingly, the crime he's primarily guilty of is, well, destruction of private property, aka vandalism. Similar to the degrees of theft, the different degrees of vandalism are determined by the total value of goods involved in the crime. This misdemeanor to felony threshold typically ranges between a few hundred to a few $1,000s in damages. Most vandalism sentences usually focus on finding the perpetrator and
Jerry better than GT. Tom. Come on, don't do this, Tom. Don't do this, Santi.
reimbursing the victim, but felony vandalism can carry some harsh time in the clink if the judge deems it so. According to the US Sentencing Commission, the average property destruction offender faces 2 years in prison. In order to figure out just how often Kool-Aid Man is doing felony level damage, we'll need to assess the cost of his incidents. Luckily for us, a Reddit user and professional damage estimator already tallied up an estimated cost of the Kool-Aid Man recreating the Wrecking Ball music video in the kitchen. According to them, accounting for the walls, wiring, and floor damage, the average kitchen wall destroyed by the pitcher of fruit punch would cost roughly $5,000 to repair. That is well over the felony threshold, meaning mostly every single wall bust is gonna get him 24 months. There are at least 25 cases in which the Kool-Aid Man burst through structures that'll warrant felony charges. This long list of vandalized property includes several walls, a complete limo door, and a park slide which will cost at least $1,500 to replace. Technically, 2 of the walls the Kool-Aid Man, into oblivion were on his own property, so he would wouldn't face criminal charges over those. This totals out the Kool-Aid Man's sentence as 46 years in jail, and the likely repair costs will be in the neighborhood of somewhere between $115,000 and $230,000 in fines. So to answer the question posed earlier, yeah, Kraft Heinz can totally afford the penalties this wannabe Marvel villain is liable for. While on the subject of beverages, we have to include Punchy, the Hawaiian Punch mascot. He might look like a long-lost Rocket Power cousin, but old Punchy has been committing battery since the 1960s. Thankfully,
1960s. Wow, that's a long time.
Punchy isn't exactly
More than half a century.
John Wick. He mostly sticks to singular wallops that don't dole out serious bodily harm. His punches do, however, constitute simple battery, a misdemeanor punishable by an average of 6 months. With 32 recorded instances of Punchy's signature cross, he's likely facing an 11.5-year bid. Fruit punch, man, just makes you a meanie. But it won't make you as much of a meanie as our final category of future convicts. The snack food mascots are truly an evil bunch. Take Mr. Peanut. Now, there's one mascot I was especially eager to nail due to his squeaky clean record and polished, opulent appearance. Unfortunately, although this dude has done some undeniably shady stuff, we can't pin anything truly illegal on him. Back in 2020, Mr. Peanut successfully faked his own death and rebirth into a new soul named Baby Nut. But it turns out that faking your death isn't inherently illegal on its own. Most death fakers run into trouble when the authorities are alerted to their fraudulent activities. I mean, let's face it, no one is faking their own death for good reasons. It's usually tax evasion or insurance fraud, but unfortunately, we don't have any hard evidence to put Peanut in a steel shell. This white-collar criminal gets away with it this time. No, the mascot who takes
it's like, you this time.
the cake in this entire episode is none other than Chester Cheetah. In addition to a handful of theft charges from his early years, he once took down an entire mansion in the early 2000s. We're talking 3 stories, glass chandeliers, open ballroom. Yikes. By using the value of a similar home that's currently for sale and adjusting for inflation, we can estimate that Chester did just under $1.4 million in damages. Not only that, the homeowner could sue him for a considerable chunk of cheetah change. The commercial also highlights just how much of a dangerously cheesy wild card Chester is. In this commercial alone, the Cheeto champ would likely be charged with 13 counts of reckless endangerment, a crime that through negligence can put other people in jeopardy. Other commercials from this era show a pattern of behavior and an additional 3 counts of reckless endangerment. Chester in these commercials is brazenly risking the lives of the humans involved, so his actions would most likely result in the highest charge of reckless endangerment. So with up to 7 years per negligence charge, 2 charges from his thieving commercials, and 1 felony vandalism count, Chester is looking at 84 years in prison. So there you have it. Despite competing with a slew of thieves, flashers, crashers, and thrashers, it's Chester Cheetah that'll be behind bars the longest, especially when you take into consideration that cheetahs live about 10 years. That's more than 8 life sentences. It ain't easy being cheesy, but it ain't legal either. Fortunately,
But having said that, you do recognize that cat have 9 lives, right?
for him, orange is the new black. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Bon appetit. And if you want to check out the episodes I mentioned at the top of the video, you can click on screen now to find out how Finn the goldfish is a traitor to his own kind. And as always, friends, I'll see you next week.
Well, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you in my next video. Subscribe. Thank you. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Bon appetit. And I hope to see you all in my next video. Subscribe. Thank you so much. Subscribe.